We see that the helicopter is finally arriving at Jeju Island, and the hunters inside are visibly nervous. Meanwhile, we see that Goto Ruji's team has already arrived on Jeju Island. As they walk through the empty streets, their leader wonders if this is the upper district, noting that it is no different from a ghost town. After analyzing the situation, Goto instructs his teams distributed across the island to respond to his call. Once he confirms that everyone can hear him, he orders them to spread out and begin the attack. Without further delay, everyone starts releasing massive amounts of energy to attract the ants' attention. Across the island, bursts of power erupt. From the helicopters approaching the island, the Korean hunters are shocked by the enormous amount of magical energy. Choi notes that the Japanese have likely already started their attack. Hundreds and hundreds of ants begin emerging from their nest upon sensing the energy explosions across the island. A few flying ants immediately head toward the helicopter carrying the Korean hunters. Choi quickly positions himself at the door and tells his teammates to let him handle them. Without hesitation, he prepares to launch one of his attacks, releasing 3 fire blasts that directly hit the ants, causing a large explosion. Seeing this, another hunter remarks that it was impressive, but Choi replies that it really wasn't. The reason becomes clear. His flames only manage to take down 1 ant, while the others remain airborne. Because of this, Choi tells the pilot that the helicopter will move slightly and instructs him to keep it steady. He then unleashes an even more powerful attack, incinerating the remaining ants. He then informs his companions that the ants have evolved since the last time, as they now appear to have a resistance similar to that of A-rank dungeon monster. With that, Choi jumps out of the helicopter, saying that he wants to see just how strong these creatures have become. And upon seeing them, Tarm wonders if everything will be okay. To which Chihi responds that yes, because after all, his magic is more powerful when facing more than one enemy. As soon as he says this, we see Choi cushioning his fall using his flames, and then, without hesitation for even a second, he makes all the ants there explode. After finishing with them, he tells his teammates that it is now safe to descend. From the helicopter, Madong says that the plan they are following could still turn against them, and they could end up trapped in the ants' cave and perish. The Japanese hunters can only draw their attention for about an hour, and during that time, they need to come in and deal with the queen. So, in summary, they must be ready for anything. Without further ado, all the Korean Rango hunters jump into battle, ready to exterminate the ants. Meanwhile, from another area, Kori and Sugimoto say they will also begin their attack and give the order to activate the electronic blocking waves. Thus, a satellite activates over the island, and we are told that with this, the ants will not be able to receive signals from their queen. The situation on the ground is that Kumamoto is very frightened, while his companion tells him to stay alert for the ants, or else he'll die. At that moment, another hunter asks if they don't think this step will eliminate all the ants before the Korean team can deal with the queen. Another replies that it is possible while asking where Kenten Naka went. She answers that he's playing tag with the ants and going around destroying the flying ants. As usual, he's acting like a child. On the Japanese team, one hunter says he can see fireworks near the entrance to the ant nest. Another tells him that this is probably the work of Cho Yong. We then see that above the ant nest, there's something like a web, and the hunters say they had heard that this place was famous for its beauty, but now it's a complete disaster, just an ant nest. After this, Choi says that the flames above primarily serve to restrict enemy entry, and that ants below rank B won't be able to pass through them. The situation is that Choi prepares to use another attack while saying he will look for the entrance, and without further ado, he launches dozens of fireballs, which fly in all directions inside the nest. Seeing this, Ba Yun asks, frightened, what he's doing, to which Choi responds that the ant tunnels are like mazes, and if they're not careful, they'll end up lost or back where they started. He assumes the queen is where the explosion didn't reach. Just then, he turns toward a hole and says that must be the way. At this, Ba can only think that, as expected, Choi is a very reliable companion. Meanwhile, in Korea, we see Sun carrying out his daily tasks. While resting, he says that this neighborhood is usually very lively, but today there doesn't seem to be anyone around. Then he remembers it's because the incursion on Jeju Island has already begun. At this, Sun thinks that anyway, there's no reason for him to watch the incursion since even without him, he's sure that they are skilled enough to complete it successfully. On Jeju Island, we see the ants being exterminated while Choi says that, apart from a few, all the ants they encountered were the expected ones. Minion asks if those are the queen's guards or something, as they seem a bit weak. Then, focusing on another ant, he says its eyes are atrophied, and it was probably ordered to safeguard something specific in that tunnel. To this, Minion asks if they really think the queen is there, as there are cases in history where the king abandons his people. To which Bick responds that they're just ants and don't know anything about that. Also, this is an island, and there's no place for them to fly to. The hunters continue walking until they find the pupae chamber. Immediately, they say that this means the queen must be nearby. Seeing this, Choi says that the ants they just defeated must have been guarding the pupae. Without further ado, he raises his hands to burn them all. But Chae tells him to wait, and focusing on one pupa, says it is the largest of all. To this, Minion says that can't be a pupa, and if it is, then what the hell came out of it? Baig tells him to forget about it, as they should only focus on finishing off the queen. But he understands perfectly why his friend is so nervous. Meanwhile, outside the nest, a Japanese hunter tells Ken that it's a mess, to which he responds that those ants were really annoying, and they had some strategies in mind because they were flying toward him in different directions. That's why he ended up injuring his shoulder and hip. Shimizu asks if he wants her to heal him, but clearly, there will be a condition. Ken simply tells her to stop joking and heal him already because they need to stop wasting time since more ants are arriving. Turning to her, he tells her to hurry, but just at that moment, his head detaches from his body, and none of those present can believe what they're seeing. The thing is, Ken quickly tells his teammates to get on guard, but before he can say anything else, he feels an imposing presence in front of him, and without hesitation, he launches the attack, seeking to avenge his comrade. However, his head is also ripped off in the blink of an eye, and his body just follows the motion by sheer inertia as it falls to the ground. In response, the remaining hunter from that team charges forward in anger, and it seems he at least manages to land a cut. But in the next panel, we see that he too lost his head without being able to do anything. We get a top-down view of 3 Japanese S-rank hunters who were eliminated in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, inside the nest, the Korean hunters have already encountered the queen's guards. We see Madden preparing to face one of them while saying that all these ants would give the S-rank hunters a hard time, but in the end, a beast is a beast, and compared to hunters who use different tactics, these ants are nothing special. Without further ado, he engages in combat with one of them. However, it seems the ant will be the winner when it lands a fatal blow, but at the last moment, Chae appears above it, stabbing her sword into its head. Then, using her feet, she gives the necessary push to cut it with an impressive movement. As if that weren't enough, she quickly turns around and, with a single, incredible cut, takes down a second ant that was charging at her. She remarks that these ants are a bit more resistant than she expected. Meanwhile, Madden says that the Royal Guard ants are quite different from the normal ones, but fortunately, there aren't many of them. Min Bayan, behind them, tells them not to worry, as he's watching their backs. To this, Beck responds that it seems he's not a rookie after all, and his friend tells him to speak for himself since he should stop making rookie mistakes, finishing off an approaching ant with a single strike. Beck mentions that it's just a guess, but he believes the first generation of ants was stripped of its duty as Royal Guard, and it seems that from now on, they'll have to deal with second-generation ants or higher. In response, Min Bayan says that if that's the case, they should prepare, and without further ado, he casts a spell that improves his companion's abilities, telling them that with this, they can handle multiple enemies at once and emerge victorious. Now, we leave the ant nest and see other Japanese hunters moving quickly, wondering why Team Charlie isn't responding. They arrive at their location and say they should find them there. After inspecting a bit, they find Fujishima's glasses on the ground. When they look around in the distance, they're shocked, and the one with the mask can't help but vomit. Immediately, his companion asks what's wrong, but he doesn't respond, instead wondering what that awful, putrid smell is, saying he's never smelled anything like it before. Just then, they sense a presence in the trees ahead. Without hesitation, the hunter attacks directly in that direction, causing unmatched destruction, but it seems their enemy is even stronger as it breaks through all the ice barriers and strikes the hunter with a single blow, piercing through the final barrier protecting him. Back in the nest, the Korean hunters say that this took longer than they expected, and Ba Young can only think that Minion powered up Chae too much, as she eliminated twice as many ants in the same amount of time. Chae says she's sensing the queen's scent and that it seems she has the royal guard with her. Ba Young immediately volunteers to check first. Indeed, after advancing a few meters, he encounters the queen ant, which is enormous. He quickly returns to his companions and tells them that the queen is farther back, and there are 8 guards protecting her. In response, Madden says he will handle the queen and asks Jae to take care of the guards. Choi also prepares to fight, saying that normally he would limit his power, but it would be a shame if he had too much mana today. Without further ado, he unleashes all his power in an incredibly epic panel. At this, I can only imagine how this will look animated. Just then, an ant appears behind him, but is immediately stopped by arrows from Lim Taeg, who tells them he's supporting them from the rear. Baek says that his companions are right, and there's no reason to hold back, and without further ado, he transforms into his final form, turning into something like a werewolf. It really looks incredible, and I can't wait to see it animated. With his stunning final form, Ba Young charges into battle, eliminating 2 ants using nothing but his hands. Then, filled with emotion, they howl on another panel, simply impressive. On the other side, Chahi strikes the ground with his sword, releasing a massive amount of power, while the ants rush toward her with the intent to tear her apart. Meanwhile, Madden thinks that until the entire royal ant guard is dead, he will distract the queen, and without further ado, he starts drawing the colossal monster's attention, which immediately turns toward him. On the other side, the cameraman's bosses ask if the final battle has started, since the audience has increased by 80%, and they tell him to make sure the camera is closer so people can see better. However, just at that moment, someone grabs him by the neck and pulls him away from danger. It turns out to be Mimbai, who tells him that a rank S boss resides in that place and that no one can guarantee his safety, and that the situation will only get more serious from now on. The situation is that across all of Korea, people are watching TV and learn that Bai Jun has taken out one of the guards. They then say that half of the royal guard has been taken care of, and now only 3 remain. Finally, when they say that now only the queen is left, an old man is heard saying that this is the 4th attempt at an incursion, and that they better succeed this time. So, as they say that now, just like the United States, China, Russia, and France, it seems Korea will finally take its place as one of the countries that was able to clear a rank S portal. As soon as they say this, we see Madden ready to face the queen. However, at that moment, Limpt shoots his arrows, which pierce directly into the queen's head. Then, Baek delivers a tremendous swipe to one of her legs while telling his teammates not to be afraid, because without her guards, the queen is nothing but an empty shell. But just at that moment, the queen starts spitting poison everywhere, covering the hunters, and immediately, they begin to suffer the effects. However, Minamban quickly starts using his power, and the effects of the poison disappear instantly. In response to this, the hunter tells the ant that if she wanted to defeat them, she should have aimed that attack at him. As soon as he says this, the ant charges at him at full speed. But before she can touch him, Madden appears, stopping her, telling her that he can't let her get close to his healer that easily. Just then, Choi tells everyone to step back and without further ado, releases a powerful fire blast directly at the queen. Then, by condensing his flames even more, he makes them surround the queen and start incinerating her. In response, Baek says the queen ant is finished, and he can tell this from his long battle experience. Right now, it seems like the queen ant is close to death, and victory is within their grasp. However, in that instant, the ant releases one last burst of power, accompanied by a scream of agony. The hunters can only cover themselves from the wave of power as they wonder what is happening. The one who understands immediately is Baek, who says that this was not an agony scream, but a call for help. Meanwhile, from the Japanese ship, Sugimoto tells Goto that all the ants are returning to the tunnel again because the interference signal is not working. The best hunter in Japan has no choice but to watch as the ants rush back to their nest, wondering what is going on. The case is that inside the nest, Chaha delivers the final blow and cuts off the queen ant's head. As soon as it falls to the ground, he asks his teammates if it's over. In response, Lim takes wonders if they are really one of the 7 countries that managed to clear a rank S portal. But Baek tells him to wait, as something feels wrong. Just then, Madden informs them that all the ants are returning to the tunnel and that they need to hurry and evacuate. The problem is that, at that moment, Choi also notices that something is wrong and tells them that the fire barrier he set up at the entrance to the tunnel was destroyed in seconds. Before he can add anything else, everyone present freezes because they sense an overwhelming presence approaching. Just at that instant, from the darkest darkness, a creature starts to emerge. As it steps into the light, it begins releasing an absurd amount of energy, which is so massive that it starts to leave the nest, and it can be seen from miles away. At that point, Chaha falls to the ground as soon as he smells this new enemy. Without further ado, we have a totally impressive panel of a new ant that looks terrifying and different from the rest. In response, Chaha wonders what this terrifying pressure is and says that this is definitely not an ordinary beast. Meanwhile, the new ant continues to move toward them, and at that moment, we are told that the creature that suddenly appeared before their eyes is an entity that can cause terror just with the sound of its footsteps. Madong feels the same pressure as Chaha and says that they don't have time to stay idle and must hurry to finish off this new enemy. But no matter how much he tries, he cannot move even an inch as the monster passes by him. The case is that after the impressive appearance of the definitive ant, it moves toward the queen's corpse, ignoring the other hunters. Seeing it standing there without doing anything, they wonder if it really walked straight to the queen and ignored them. However, just at that moment, the ant releases a tremendous scream that makes everyone fall to the ground, completely overwhelmed by its power. And without further ado, he turns to look at them, his anger reflected in his gaze. However, the only one who didn't fall to the ground was Chihi, who remains standing, attentive to all their movements. But before she can even react, the ant appears behind her at full speed and, without hesitation, lands a brutal blow to the hunter's side. She is sent flying several meters after receiving the tremendous impact and ends up violently crashing into a wall. Seeing this, Madden tries to run to help her. But before he can take a step, the ant appears behind him as well. Although he tries to shield himself from the blow, the impact is so strong that it completely shatters his shield and also breaks his arm. When the hunter attempts to counterattack with the weapon in his other hand, the ant stops it effortlessly and rips it from his grasp, leaving him out of the fight. In another panel, beyond the epic moment, the new ant turns around after ripping off both of Madden's arms. Seeing this, Bayoon decides to go on the offensive too. However, as soon as he takes a step, the ant rushes by his side and lands several massive cuts on him. Choi also tries to help his teammates, but like the others, he is struck by the ant before he can use his abilities. At that moment, Lim Take appears behind the ant, ready to shoot with his bow while thinking that at this distance, there's no way he will miss. Without further ado, he releases the arrow with determination reflected in his gaze. However, the ant also stops this attack using nothing but its hands, then appears in front of the hunter in the blink of an eye, knocking him out with a single blow. Just at that moment, the ant is intercepted by someone returning to the fight. Madden says that even if his arms are cut off, it won't be a problem for him as long as he has the healer, Mimbong. We see that indeed, his arms have grown back and he's ready to return to combat. Mimbong, on the other hand, thinks that all of this is possible because of his camouflage protection ability, which allows him to maintain a low profile and hide his presence completely. However, for the ability to work, he can't move. Meanwhile, Madden goes on the attack again, thinking that even if the ant wants to eliminate him, it doesn't know where he is, and as long as his team receives his healing, they won't lose easily. The ant grabs Madden by the feet and starts slamming him into the ground repeatedly. As the hunter takes damage without stopping, Minion does his best to heal him. The problem here is that, at that moment, the ant seems to turn to look at him, and the hunter says that with his camouflage activated, it shouldn't know where he is. However, just then, its leg pierces through Madden's torso, and from the ground, Bayoon can do nothing but watch helplessly as his friend is eliminated. As soon as Madden is pierced, surprise is reflected on Min Dayoung's face, and it's the last time we see his face, as the ant rips his head off in one bite. Seeing this, no one present can believe it. In response, Baekjun decides to attack to avenge his friend, but before he can get close to the ant, it stops him by grabbing him by the neck. At this moment, we are explained that consuming the prey is not the only thing this monster does. By eating it, it also steals its power and knowledge. Without further ado, the ant asks who their king is, and Baekjun can only ask what it means. At that moment, something else catches the ant's attention, and it says it can feel that someone strong is outside. Without hesitation, it darts toward that direction at full speed. Baekjun falls to the ground, in very bad condition, wondering if the ant is going after Gotu Riwi. But before he can think any further, something else grabs his attention. Dozens of ants are beginning to return to the nest, and they will likely attack. By the way, once we reach 10,000 likes, the next part of this video will be uploaded. After the tremendous beating the new ant gives the Korean hunters, we switch to Gotu's team, who is running through the forest at full speed. While doing so, one of the hunters says it's strange that they've lost contact with Team Charlie and Delta. Go-To says that there must be a problem with the signals since there's no other reason for them to cut off communication and decides to call Team B to check if they're okay. Immediately, Team B responds, telling him that they couldn't contact the other two teams either. But just at that moment, surprise appears on their faces as, no matter how much they call through the earpiece, no one answers. They silently observe the corpses of their teammates. Finally, when Go-To answers, he simply says that they've suffered some casualties. The person on the other side of the earpiece tells him that it seems like they've lost some team members while trying to help the Koreans, and Go-To replies that it's true, but those guys were just weak and they don't need to worry about it. In response, his superior tells him to let out the cold man, as that's all they need. After this, Go-To says that the interference signals failed, and all the ants ran back to the queen, expressing some concern about what this could cause. And with this, his boss asks him what the possibilities are for the Korean team to survive. Go-To responds that after testing the strength of the team that is on the mission, he is sure they have a 0% chance of surviving. Upon hearing this, the boss says that they can then claim the Japanese did everything possible to help, but due to the loss of the Korean team, they were forced to retreat, and that their final objective, which was the annihilation of the S-rank hunters from Korea, was successful. He then orders everyone to retreat at once. The thing is, Go-To tells his companions that it's time to withdraw and that they can recover their fallen comrades later. But just then, he is forced to defend himself from a sudden attack that decapitates one of his teammates. At this, Go-To realizes that this ant is not like the others, so he tells his remaining teammate to leave it to him and hurry to join Team Bravo. Without further delay, he focuses on his enemy and tells it that it is emitting a very fearsome aura. Upon hearing this, the ant merely looks at him while holding his teammate's head in its hands and asks if he is the king. Go-To, full of confidence, replies that indeed he is the king, while aiming his weapon at it. At that moment, the ant begins to release its energy again, and upon feeling its power, Go-To wonders what that immense pressure is. He then says that he has felt that feeling before and wonders if it was during his fight with Sunong. But before he can think further, his sword is cut in half, and his head falls to the ground, ending the battle, if it can even be called that. Back with the Korean hunters, we see that Choi is the only one left trying to defend his teammates. While doing his best, Ba Jun thinks to himself that everyone is in critical condition, and though Min Bayan was able to minimize it to some extent, the damage they suffered was quite substantial. At this point, they can only rely on Choi's flames. We have another panel of the hunter giving his best effort to eliminate the ants attacking them. The thing is, when it seems the ants have finally overwhelmed the hunters, Bakes wonders if this is the end. But just then, a shadow appears in front of him, stopping the ants that were attacking them. Seeing the shadow, Ba asks who the hell is that black knight. And from somewhere in Korea we see Sun, quite serious, observing what is happening on the island of Yuyu. Without hesitation, he decides to use his swapping ability. Back on Yuyu Island, we now see the cameraman in trouble, as two large ants are heading directly to finish him off. In response, the cameraman simply says that he can't believe the last thing he spoke with his father was that he had eaten dinner, and he says that he should have spoken more with him. However, at that very moment, a blow passes just inches from his head, and when he looks up, he finds that the two ants attacking him have been impaled by a large sword. In another panel, we see that it is none other than... Meanwhile, on the television channel broadcasting the invasion, we see the boss wondering, very shocked, if all the rank S hunters are really being eliminated by an ant. He places his hand on his face as he laments and says that they are finished. But just at that moment, one of his employees tells him that an anonymous figure has just appeared on the battlefield. As soon as the boss fixes his gaze on the screen in front of him, he can only say that he can't believe what he's seeing. Without hesitation, he gives the order to rush and start the broadcast again, to which his worker responds that if they start right now, it will be live, and if there's an emergency, they won't be able to edit it. The boss responds that things can't get worse, and that nothing will stop them now, so they should just start the broadcast immediately, no matter what happens. Now, their fate is completely in the hands of that mysterious person who just appeared on the battlefield. And so, with Sun Jinwoo arriving on the U Island to save his teammates, we reach the end of this summary of Solo Leveling. Remember that if you liked this video, you can always leave a like, comment, or share it so the algorithm treats us better and we reach more people.